This is an academic divider, and believe it or not, it can take your art to the next level. I'm going to show you what it is, what it does, and how to use it. This tool was on the supply list of the first art class that I ever took at university. And to be honest, they never really showed us how to use it. But it was really expensive at the time, and so I kept it. And over the years, I discovered many different ways that it could help me learn to draw. Even though I went to art school, I really wasn't that great at drawing when I first started. It's something that evolved over time, and this little tool was instrumental in helping me. It's like a compass, except that it has 2 points instead of 1. And it's stiff enough that I can move it to any position, and it's going to hold that position. I'm not even 100% sure exactly what the official name is for this tool. I've seen it called many things, including a plane divider, a caliper, an adjustable drawing tool, and I've purchased a few more over the years as well by some different companies. If you go to one of the bigger art supply stores to their architectural drawing section, that's where you'll find them. But you can also find inexpensive ones online looking up ECG caliper dividers because, believe it or not, this same tool is used by nurses and doctors to measure ECGs or EKGs if you're in the US. And those are often a little bit smaller like this one, which is great for a travel size. This one is about 6.5 inches, whereas this one is about 4 3/4. So what does it do that makes it so special? This little beauty can act as a calculator to help you check your proportions and dimensions. It can act as an angle checker to check angles, which is useful when perspective drawing. And it can also act as your teacher, because by using this, you'll be able to check your work and you'll learn how to draw better. There's another tool called a proportional divider, and there are many different versions of this as well. But those are usually larger and they function differently because they help you scale up or scale down your work. If you'd like me to make a video about how this works, let me know in the comments. A divider is a little bit different and I prefer it. And now I'll show you how all those things work. This is a copy of an ink drawing that I did a few months ago, and this is the reference photo that I took to use as my inspiration. You might already be familiar with how to take a unit of measurement to determine the proportions of the items in your composition. And often you'll use a pencil or a straight edge to do that. And if you're not familiar, here's how that works very quickly. If I'm drawing this building, I can use this as one end and my thumb as the other, and I can figure out the width of this barn, and then I can use that unit of measurement to decide how large or how small other items are in relation to that. So I can turn it this way and I can see that the height of the barn gets me to about this section. So it's only a little bit taller than it is wider from here to here. And I can do things like take that same measurement, move it over, and see that the same width of that barn right next to it will get me to roughly this section. And it's things like that that help you learn how to place items and have the proportions be accurate. But this can be kind of cumbersome, and it can also be a little undependable because if I take one measurement and then go and draw and then come back and take another measurement, I might slightly be changing the measurement each time. And that's where this is really handy because I can take my measurement once, it's going to hold its place, and then I can just casually look around the rest of the composition. So I can see that from here to here, it gets me to there, just like I saw before. And if I take it to the edge of the barn, it gets me here. I can see that the length of the silo from right beneath the dome is the same length as the width of the barn, and so on and so forth. And so then I can go to my painting or drawing, which may be the same size or may be a different size, and I can figure out the length of that. And I can check it, and I can see that I was pretty good there. And I can see over here, that's also pretty accurate. And my silo's slightly larger, but in a situation like this, I really wasn't too bothered about it. So by using this, you can actually learn to train your eye. So you can sketch something in freehand and then check it and make adjustments as you need to. And in that way, you're helping to train your eye to learn how to draw better. So it really is a bit of a teacher. And this tool also helps when you're drawing more complicated city or town scenes. For instance, maybe I feel confident about where I've placed this tower and I can look straight down and see that this building is below it, but I want to figure out how to space all of these other items. So I could take the tower and measure other buildings against it. And if I was looking at the reference image, I could see that this one's a bit smaller. From here to here is the same width. And from here to here is about the same width as well. I can also take the width at the base And I can see how many widths tall this item is. So I could see that 1, 2, 3, and a little bit taller than it is wide. This tool is also really helpful when I'm drawing symmetrical objects, like this little ceramic jar that I use to hold Poppy's treats. So I can use the unit of measurement process to see that it's almost twice as high as it is wide. And I can begin by putting in a straight line that I'm later planning to erase. I've drawn mine a little bit darker just for the purposes of this illustration. So I can draw this jar at any width that I'd like, and I'm paying attention to the curve on the bottom. And that's about how wide I would like my jar to be. Keep in mind that I'm looking at it in real life as I'm drawing this, whereas you're looking at a photograph, so your curve might be slightly different than the one that I'm seeing. Nevertheless, I can use this tool and measure from the plumb line, and I want to match that same distance for the left side. And this way, things are going to look more realistic, and I'm not going to draw a jar that's lopsided. So if I now take that width, and I can determine that the top of the jar is around here, and the rim is about here. And I've determined that the distance to the lip of the jar is about 1¼ times the width. So I can put that curve here. And this is where some people might get into trouble. And maybe they would draw the top over here and get things slightly askew. I'm exaggerating a little bit. But I know that because this is a symmetrical object, that little top part is going to be right in the center. And also I can take the same distance from here to here, and it will help me connect my lines to make sure that things aren't all wibbly wobbly and askew. And then by the same token, I have a middle point here to determine the curve of the lid. And then I just want to repeat that on the other side. And I can later go in with the shading and the other details, but I'm confident because I double checked everything. And I can also take that same measurement and measure from the bottom to the top here and the bottom to the top here and make sure that those are also accurate. And then I can straighten those lines. And you can use a ruler if you want to, but I always think it's better to try to train your eye to draw something as straight as you can. And you can erase this plumb line later, and you can go in with your shading and adding of highlights and adding your cast shadow and everything else, but you can be confident that the drawing is accurate. When I was teaching, I could walk around the classroom with this tool and help students figure out if their proportions were correct or not. This is a discarded student portrait that I have with some of my cast-offs, and I'm going to show you how that would work. So for instance, if I look at this portrait, I can look at the length of this eye, and I can measure it against the other features. So the eyes are exactly one eye apart, and they're also exactly the same size. But I can also do things like go from the corner of the eye, and I can see that one eye gets me to the top of this nostril. Another eye gets me just above the lip. Another eye gets me just above his beard. And then a little more than half an eye gets me to the bottom of the chin. So we have 1, 2, 3, about 3½ eye lengths from the corner of the eye to the bottom of the chin. So with that information, I could now go over to the student's portrait or my own and check it. So I'll measure the length of the eye, and remembering the proportions as I saw them, I can check his work. So I can see that they're exactly one eye apart, they're exactly the same size, and here one eye length gets me to this, and then another gets me here. So his mouth is up a little bit higher than in the portrait, but it's not really bad. And then a third gets me above the beard, and the fourth gets me here. So I can see that a lot of these proportions are correct, but I can also take that further. I would look and try to decipher where things maybe were a little bit wrong, and I can check it. So many of these elements are looking pretty good, but there are a few areas that I want to double check, specifically this area over here and this area here. So I can go to my reference image, again, take a measurement of the eye and measure from the inside corner, 1, 2, And I can see that it's about 2.5 eye lengths to the edge of the head here. And then I can go back over to the drawing, take the measurement of the eye, and see if this has the same measurement. So I can go 1, 2, and I can see that this drawing is about 2 3/4. So just by moving this edge of the face over a tiny little bit, it's going to look more like the face that I'm drawing. And by the same token, again, taking the measurement of the eye, measuring down from the inside corner, I can see that it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or to make it a little bit more simple, I can just go to the bottom of the chin and see that it's 1 1/4 to where the shirt starts. And if I take the measurement of the eye in the drawing, I can see that it's almost 1 3/4. So this shirt needs to be brought up a little bit to make his neck look more in proportion with his face. And you can find the little nuances like that with this tool very easily. And that saves a lot of time, especially with portraiture where you spend so much time mapping things out as a beginner. And then he could go in and spend hours doing the shading, which is going to take many more hours. Another thing this tool can do is help you check angles in perspective drawings. So going back to this picture of the barn, some might have trouble figuring out this angle or even this one of the side of the barn. And as long as the drawing that you're working on is on the same level as your reference, whether it's a photograph or if you're drawing from life, you'll hold it up so that it's parallel to what your eyes see. Your angles will be the same. And the way that works is I take the divider and I want one side to be vertical, and you can check it with another straight edge. And then you can open it up, find the angle, and I can take that over to my drawing and I can see that I did that accurately. And then I can do the same thing with this slight angle. I can see that it's slightly different, and that's the slope that it's at. And if I go over here, I can see that I also got that accurate. And I can do that same technique with all of the other items. Sometimes, especially when you're drawing or painting outside, you don't want to spend hours measuring to vanishing points. And if you just have 1 or 2 angles, this is a really quick way to be able to check them. And even if you have spent the time measuring things, when you're drawing from life, things are always slightly different than in a textbook. And so this little trick can really help you get out of a jam. So here's how it might work in real time. This is an ink drawing that I did a few years ago, and I can measure the length of this building to the bottom of the porch. And I can see that this main part of the building is a little bit shorter. And so I can put this in on a drawing that's the same size. It starts about there, ends about there. And you can be as detailed or as quick about this as you want. And the more you practice by using this, the better you'll get at being able to trust your eye. But it's nice if you're looking at something you've drawn and you see that something's not quite right, but you can't figure out where. This tool will act a little bit like a calculator does for math, and it will help you check your work. So if you're drawing the same size, you can be sneaky and you can do things like decide where on the end the building begins and put the length in this way. But I don't like to draw that way because what ends up happening is your work will look a little bit stiff and it won't really look realistic. So I rather would use it to check my work and to figure out the main proportions. But if I know that I want the top of my roof to be somewhere around here, I can use this to help me decide on the angle. And I can do the same thing for the other side. I've sped this process up a bit just to give you an idea about what it looks like in practice. And you can use this tool whether you're drawing from a photograph or whether you're drawing from life. The process is the same. If you're newer to drawing, pick a smaller unit of measurement. So maybe from the peak of the roof to the top of the porch roof, and then use that measurement to determine the position of other lines and angles in the composition. And if you use a combination of unit of measurement and also looking at the shapes and the lines as they are in relation to one another in the composition, you're going to get better at drawing rather quickly. And start simply. You don't need to start by drawing a complicated town scene. Start with a bird or a little animal or a very simple sweet house like this one. And then when you've sharpened your skills a little bit and built up some confidence, you can begin to tackle more complicated subject matter. I have a few videos over on my Patreon where I went into great detail about using this divider, so head on over there if that interests you. And another tip is when you're first learning to draw, practice drawing things the same size as you see them, as I'm doing here. Later on, you can scale things up, making them bigger, or scale them down, making them smaller. But drawing things exactly the same size as you see them is a really good way to get better at drawing. By using this divider to help me figure out some of the basic elements, I was able to position those where they needed to be and sketch this out very quickly. This only took a few minutes. And then I can go in and add more details later, or if I'm thinking maybe something's a bit askew, I can use this to check it. So for instance, I can check from here to here, and I can see that that same distance gets me to just above the railing a little bit. And if I look at my drawing, I can see that I'm actually pretty close. So I'm happy with the way that I've sketched this out. But if I were newer to drawing and I wasn't really sure, I can spend the time measuring things before I start to draw to help train my eye to realize the distance between different measurements. And if you practice this enough, eventually your eyes will become trained and you really won't need to rely on it as much, but it's always there in case you need it to check your work. If you'd like to learn more about how to use it, head on over to my Patreon where I have full-length tutorials. And if you like this video, give it a like and subscribe because it really helps my channel grow. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you have a beautiful day and happy creating.